Ketu, the South Node. You know, in my opinion, Ketu is the hardest planet because Ketu is in my first house, and everyone on YouTube says that you should detach from the things where Ketu sits. But I was always very confused, maybe because of Ketu in my first house. What exactly am I supposed to detach from? Do I become homeless on personality because it asks me to detach from my personality? And you know what? I think I finally found the answer. Want to know what it is? Then watch the full video. Ketu is the only planet in your chart that does not want anything from you. Every other planet has a demand. The sun wants you to exist fully. The moon wants you to feel honestly. Mars wants you to act without excuses. Mercury wants you to think clearly. Venus wants you to want things on purpose. Jupiter wants you to believe before you have proof. Ketu wants nothing. And that is precisely what makes it the most unsettling planet in your entire chart. In Vedic astrology, Ketu is called Ketu, the south node of the moon. Not a physical planet, but a mathematical point where the moon's orbit intersects the ecliptic on its way downward. Ancient astrologers treated it as a planet because it behaves like one. It governs an entire territory of your life. It has a specific energy, it creates specific results, and it teaches a specific lesson that no other planet teaches. Ketu represents what you have already mastered, not in this lifetime necessarily. In the oldest traditions of Vedic astrology, Ketu represents the accumulated wisdom and experience of previous existences, distilled into instinct. The things that come too easily to you, the things you do without thinking, and the skills that feel old and familiar before you have even properly learned them. This sounds like a gift, but it is not. Not entirely. Because Ketu also represents where you no longer need to grow. The house Ketu sits in within your chart is an area of life where you have, in some deep sense, been there, done that. There is a subtle but real detachment from the results in that area. Things happen there without you chasing them, and things leave from there without you being able to hold them. People, money, recognition, relationships, all of it passes through the Ketu house like water through open hands. Most people misread this as bad luck, but it is not bad luck. It is completion. What Ketu does when you ignore its nature is this. You keep trying to build something in the area where Ketu sits. You chase achievement there, pour energy there, measure your worth through what you accumulate there. And it keeps slipping, not dramatically, quietly. Almost as if the universe is gently, but persistently, redirecting your hands away from something you have been reaching for. That is Ketu, redirecting you. A weak or ignored Ketu looks like this. Chronic dissatisfaction in one specific area of life, not because you are failing there, but because nothing you achieve there feels like enough. A spiritual restlessness that no material acquisition can touch. Difficulty staying attached to things that logically should matter to you. A strange sense of having been somewhere before that you cannot name. Ketu also governs isolation, spiritual experiences, foreign lands, and sudden unexplained losses. When Ketu is active in your chart through its planetary time period, things that were yours simply stop being yours. Jobs, relationships, places, identities. Not because something went wrong, but because Ketu is clearing the inventory for what comes next. The highest expression of Ketu is liberation, not enlightenment in a vague spiritual sense. Practical freedom from the need for external validation in a specific area of life. The person with a strong Ketu placement does not need the world to confirm their worth in that area. They have a quiet inner authority there, coming from a place even they cannot fully explain. And that was exactly what confused me. How do you beat Ketu? Or rather, how do you work with it? Because Ketu cannot be beaten the way Mars can be beaten. Ketu does not respond to discipline, willpower, or better habits. It responds to surrender. Specifically, surrendering the attachment to outcomes in the area of life it governs. Psychologically, this maps directly onto what modern research calls non-attachment or detachment-based coping. Studies in positive psychology, particularly research by Ken Sheldon and colleagues on goal pursuit, have found that people who hold their goals loosely, pursuing them with effort but without identifying their entire self-worth with the outcome, consistently report higher well-being and, paradoxically, better results than those who grip their goals with both hands. Ketu was saying this 3,000 years before the research was published. The practical application is this. Identify the area of life where things consistently slip through your hands, no matter how hard you try to hold them. That is your Ketu house. Stop fighting the slippage. Put your effort there, but release your identity from the outcome. Do the work. Let the result land wherever it lands. This sounds passive. It is not. It is one of the most difficult disciplines available to a human being. To act fully without gripping the result. To plant without obsessing over the harvest. To give something your genuine effort and then genuinely not need the result to confirm your worth. That is what Ketu is asking you to practice. And when you do, the strangest thing happens. The area that felt like chronic loss begins to feel like freedom, not because you start winning there, but because you stop needing to. That is Ketu, the South Node, the planet that asks nothing of you except the hardest thing of all: let go. With that, I finally got my answer. I shouldn't build my entire personality around my personality. For example, if I enjoy dancing in public, why should I care about other people's opinions? That's my personality. What else am I supposed to do? And that was my answer to what it means to detach from my personality. Not to stop being myself, but to stop seeking validation for being myself. Maybe my personality is something I have accumulated over many lifetimes. It comes naturally to me. People often tell me that I have a great personality, even when I'm not trying. So why do I keep trying to improve something that already comes naturally? Because every time I force it, it starts feeling fake, or kind of desperate. That was the answer. Detaching from my personality doesn't mean abandoning it. It means not making my self-worth depend on it. It's just like saying, do what you genuinely enjoy, not what you think you should enjoy. Because real enjoyment comes from within, not from what the outside world keeps feeding you. That was my answer. What's your answer? Comment below. Rahu, the North Node. If Ketu is the planet that wants nothing, Rahu is the planet that wants everything, and still cannot stop wanting. In Vedic astrology, Rahu is called Rahu, the North Node of the Moon. Like Ketu, it is a mathematical point, not a physical body. The point where the Moon's orbit crosses the ecliptic on its way upward. In the ancient astronomical tradition, the two nodes were imagined as a cosmic serpent, Ketu as the tail, and Rahu as the head. The head is always hungry. The head is always consuming. The head is never satisfied. That is Rahu exactly. Where Ketu is the planet of what you have already mastered, Rahu is the planet of what you have not yet touched. It rules the unfamiliar, the foreign, the new, the obsessive, the intoxicating, the taboo. The house Rahu sits in is the area of your life you are completely magnetically drawn toward, even though nothing about it comes naturally. You want it desperately. You pursue it urgently. You have a relationship with that area of life that other people describe as a little intense. That intensity is Rahu. What Rahu wants from you is to go fully into the unfamiliar territory which it governs. Neither to dabble, nor to approach it with one foot still on safe ground. To commit completely to the area of life it rules. To learn it from scratch, to build something real there, and to do this knowing you will never feel fully satisfied, no matter how much you accumulate, because the dissatisfaction is the point. Rahu's dissatisfaction is the engine, not the malfunction. The hunger is what keeps you moving in a direction your soul has not yet explored. The ancient astrologers called this the karmic destiny, the thing this life is specifically pointed toward, regardless of how uncomfortable or foreign it feels. Most people misread Rahu as a promise. You are going to get rich here, or famous here, or loved here. It is not a promise. It is a direction, a relentless, sometimes ruthless pointing of your entire life toward an experience your soul has not had. What Rahu does when you ignore or resist its direction is this: the obsession does not go away. It finds other outlets. If your Rahu sits in the house of career and you keep trying to make your peace in relationships instead, the career ambition seeps into the relationships and poisons them. If your Rahu governs foreign travel and you keep planting yourself in one place, a restlessness with no name grows underneath everything you do. The hunger is mobile. It will find you. Rahu also governs illusion, technology, mass media, sudden rises, unconventional paths, and everything that does not fit the established order. The people who become famous unexpectedly, who come from nowhere and disrupt entire industries, who build things nobody thought possible, are very often running a powerful Rahu transit or placement. Rahu does not care about conventional paths. It creates new ones. A weak or unexamined Rahu looks like this: an obsessive quality in one specific area of life that you cannot explain and cannot moderate. A tendency toward addictive behavior in Rahu's domain, because Rahu's dopamine loop is one of the most powerful operating systems in your chart. A chase for recognition that never delivers the satisfaction it promised. A feeling of being a perpetual outsider in the area you most want to belong to. That outsider feeling is important. It is Rahu pointing at the fact that you are genuinely in new territory. Outsiders in new territory are supposed to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is data. It means you are exactly where Rahu is pointing you. A strong and integrated Rahu looks like this: a fierce, focused ambition that does not need external validation to sustain itself. An ability to move into unfamiliar territory without needing to be invited. A relationship with obsession that is productive rather than destructive, channeled into craft and creation rather than scattered across compulsive consumption. The ability to want something deeply and still function effectively while not having it yet. Now, how do you beat Rahu? Actually, before I tell you how to beat Rahu, I have a small announcement. This channel has finally been monetized. And since I don't have any sponsors yet, the only way I earn is through YouTube ads and now my own merchandise. So I thought, why not turn the planets we've been talking about into something you can actually wear? For Rahu, I made this Obsession unisex t-shirt. The design is inspired by the movie Obsession, because if any planet deserves that title, it's Rahu. And the funniest part? My Rahu is conjunct my moon in the 7th house, which basically means I'm cosmically qualified to become completely obsessed with my future partner. Thankfully, I watched the movie first and learned the lesson early, so hopefully my future wife won't have to file a restraining order. The Obsession tee comes in 4 colors: white, black, navy blue, and baby pink, with sizes from XS to XXL. And for everyone asking about the Jupiter merch, it's finally here too. Just look at that beautiful meditating Jupiter trying so hard to look all Sigma and cool with the quote, "Attract, don't chase." That one comes in 15 different colors with sizes from XS all the way to 3XL. Although, between the two, the Obsession tee is still my personal favorite. If you like either of them, the link is in the description. Every purchase directly supports this channel and helps me keep making videos like this. One quick thing before we continue. At least for now, the merch is available only in India. Cash on delivery isn't available yet. Also, every t-shirt is printed only after you place your order. Because each piece is made specifically for you, returns or refunds aren't possible if you accidentally order the wrong size. So please check the size chart carefully before placing your order. However, if your order arrives damaged, defective, or you receive the wrong item, don't worry, we'll make it right. And if you realize you've selected the wrong size or entered the wrong details, please email us before your order goes into production. If it hasn't been printed yet, we'll do our best to modify or cancel it. For complete details, please read the shipping policy and return and refund policy on our website before ordering. Now, let's actually learn how to beat Rahu. Rahu governs your dopamine system more directly than almost any other planet, and this is not a metaphor. Rahu's domain is craving, the pre-reward state of wanting, which neurologically corresponds to dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, the anticipation of reward, rather than reward itself. This is why Rahu's house in your chart never feels fully satisfied, even when you achieve what you were chasing, because the dopamine was in the chase. The achievement ends the chase, and then Rahu immediately begins a new one. Andrew Huberman's work on dopamine management is the most direct modern translation of how to handle a powerful Rahu. The central insight is this: stop celebrating the achievement, celebrate the effort. The moment you transfer your dopamine response from the result to the process, the addiction to results weakens, and the sustainable drive to keep working strengthens. This is not motivational advice, it is neuroscience, and it is exactly what the ancient framing of Rahu as a teacher of process over outcome was pointing at. Beyond dopamine management, Rahu responds to deliberate exposure to the unfamiliar in the specific area it governs. If your Rahu sits in the house of public communication and you are terrified of speaking in public, the worst thing you can do is avoid it. Every avoidance strengthens the fear and deepens the obsession. Systematic exposure, beginning with the smallest possible version of the feared thing and expanding gradually, directly addresses Rahu's domain. This is standard cognitive behavioral exposure therapy applied to a planetary planetary placement. The ancients called it walking toward your Rahu. Modern therapists call it graded exposure. Same method. And Rahu responds specifically to having a practice rather than a goal. A goal is a destination that ends. A practice is an ongoing relationship with a domain that never ends. Rahu cannot be satisfied by goals because the satisfaction expires. Rahu can be channeled by practice because practice never ends, and therefore the hunger is never homeless. One last thing about Rahu. Rahu and Ketu always sit exactly opposite each other in your chart. They are two ends of the same axis. Where Ketu is your past mastery, Rahu is your future territory. The South Node is where you came from. The North Node is where you are going. And the entire game of this life, according to the oldest Vedic traditions, is learning to release your grip on the Ketu end while having the courage to fully commit to the Rahu end. Most people spend their lives doing the opposite, clinging to the familiar territory of Ketu because it feels safe and effortless, resisting the unfamiliar territory of Rahu because it feels foreign and overwhelming, and living with a persistent low-level dissatisfaction that they cannot explain because they are standing between their past and their future and not fully committing to either. The instruction is not complicated. Let Ketu go. Walk toward Rahu. Do it without requiring the results to confirm that you were right to try. That is the axis. That is the whole game. Saturn. Saturn is the last planet you can see with the naked eye. Every planet before it in our solar system is visible to a human being standing on Earth looking up at the sky without any instrument at all. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. 5 planets visible to the ancient world. 5 planets that shaped the oldest astrological traditions. And then Saturn, right at the edge of naked eye visibility, the outermost boundary of what human perception could reach before the invention of telescopes. That is Saturn exactly. The planet at the edge, the one that marks where easy ends and discipline begins. Think about that for a second. The last planet our ancestors could see became the planet that teaches the last lesson most people ever learn. Saturn just wants you to earn it instead of inheriting it, being handed it, or stumbling into it with talent and charm and a well-placed Jupiter. Earn it. Through sustained, unglamorous, unwitnessed, repeated effort across a period of time long enough to prove that you are serious. That is the whole demand. And before someone comments, "Can't I just manifest it?" Saturn heard you. He quietly stamped "denied," then handed you another 1,000 repetitions. Because Saturn doesn't negotiate with effort. In Vedic astrology, Saturn is called Shani, the planet of discipline, structure, time, karma, labor, delay, chronic illness, old age, death, judges, servants, the poor, and the bones. Yes, your bones. Saturn rules the skeletal structure, the framework that everything else is built on. A weak Saturn shows up in the body as problems with the bones, the teeth, the joints, the skin, the structural materials. Notice something interesting. Every planet rules something important, but Saturn rules the framework, the thing everything else depends on. Without a skeleton, nothing stands. Without discipline, neither do you. That's why almost every astrologer, whether they follow Vedic astrology or Western astrology, becomes a little more serious when Saturn enters the conversation. Every planet can influence your life. Saturn has a habit of reorganizing it. When Jupiter arrives, people say, "I got lucky." When Venus arrives, people say, "I found love." When Mercury arrives, people say, "My career is taking off." When Saturn arrives, people usually say, "What did I do?" And Saturn quietly replies, "We're about to find out." Because when Saturn says, "We're doing this now," every other planet quietly adjusts. And the reason for that is how Saturn works. Neither through speed nor through excitement, but through something most people can barely tolerate anymore: time. Saturn is the planet of the slow build. If Jupiter is the teacher who says, "Dream bigger," Saturn is the teacher who quietly places a 100-page assignment on your desk and says, "Due tomorrow," except tomorrow lasts about 7.5 years. Jupiter believes you can become extraordinary. Saturn asks, "Good, now prove it." Unlike Jupiter, which expands quickly and believes boldly, Saturn moves at exactly the pace required and not one moment faster. You cannot rush a Saturn lesson. You cannot charm your way through it. You cannot buy the result before you have done the work. Saturn will simply wait, patiently, infinitely, until you have put in the time. Saturn has nowhere else to be. You're the one running out of excuses. And when you have, it pays. The ancient astrologers called Saturn the greatest of all the teachers because it is the only planet whose gifts cannot be taken away. Everything Jupiter gives can be lost. Everything Venus attracts can leave. Everything Mercury builds can be misunderstood. But what Saturn gives through sustained discipline, real competence built through real effort over real time, time cannot be removed, because it lives in you, not outside you. That's why Saturn's rewards feel different. Jupiter can hand you an opportunity, Venus can bring someone into your life, Mercury can teach you a skill, Saturn turns you into the kind of person who can keep all of them, and that is much harder to lose. What Saturn wants from you every single day is accountability without audience, not performing discipline for social approval, not posting the workout to prove you went, not talking about the book you are writing or the business you are building. The actual work done privately, consistently, without requiring anyone to witness it or affirm it. You know what's funny? Nobody likes Saturn until Saturn rewards them. Then suddenly everyone becomes a philosopher. The struggle was necessary. Yes, because Saturn made sure you had no other option. Saturn doesn't care whether anyone applauds, because applause has never built anything. Consistency has. And what you actually do is perform productivity rather than practice it. You set up the system more carefully than you use it. You announce the goal before you have established the habit. You do 3 excellent focused weeks and then quietly drift away and pretend it did not happen. You wait for motivation before starting and then wonder why the discipline never arrives. Because motivation was never Saturn's language. Routine is. Saturn sees this and it responds. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with consequences. Because Saturn doesn't punish. It simply refuses to reward unfinished work. Chronic delay in the area of life Saturn governs. The sense that your timing is always slightly off. Opportunities that come but require significantly more effort than they seem to require for other people. A heaviness in the body, specifically around the structural areas. The back, knees, teeth, skin. A fear of aging, or a particularly confrontational relationship with the passage of time. Authority figures who are demanding, cold, or withholding. A difficult relationship with your father or with older men generally. Notice something. Almost none of Saturn's lessons arrive dramatically. They arrive slowly, quietly, repeatedly, like water wearing away stone. That's why people often don't notice Saturn until years later, when they suddenly realize, I've been carrying this lesson for a long time. A weak Saturn looks like this. You cut corners and then act surprised when the structure collapses. You resent the slow pace of real building and compare yourself to people whose foundations you cannot see. You confuse shortcuts with efficiency. You want the reputation without the resume. Saturn's response? Interesting. Now build it again. Except this time properly. Because Saturn never asks, how fast did you build it? It asks, will it still be standing 10 years from now? A strong Saturn looks like this. You do not need to tell anyone what you are building because the building is its own reward. You are not afraid of a long timeline because you understand that a long timeline is the quality control mechanism. You have a relationship with your own consistency that makes you trustworthy to yourself before anyone else. And when Saturn finally delivers its result, usually slowly, usually later than everyone else you are comparing yourself to, it is built on something so real that nothing outside you can dismantle it. Because it wasn't borrowed, it wasn't inherited, it wasn't gifted, it became part of you. And Saturn doesn't just influence the house it sits in. Unlike most planets, Saturn has 3 special aspects. It fully aspects the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th house from where it sits. Which basically means Saturn rarely says, I'll only discipline one area of your life. No, it likes group projects. Wherever Saturn sits, 3 more houses receive homework. For example, my Saturn sits in the 12th house. So Saturn looked at me and said, let's make him learn lessons through isolation, foreign lands, spirituality, sleep, and expenses. Apparently, one problem wasn't enough. And because Saturn aspects the 2nd, 6th, and 9th houses from there, it also influences my finances and speech, my daily work, health, and enemies, and even my beliefs, higher learning, and luck. It's almost like Saturn looked at my chart and said, while we're here, let's improve these areas too, whether I asked for it or not. The exact results always depend on the entire chart. No single placement tells the whole story, but Saturn's message almost never changes. Responsibility. Whatever Saturn aspects becomes slower, heavier, more demanding, but ultimately stronger if you accept the lesson. And this is why Shani is feared. Not because he enjoys suffering, but because he refuses to let weak foundations pretend they are strong. Which brings us to the most important question. Now, how do you beat Saturn? First, enough terrifying you. Saturn is not your enemy. It is the teacher who refuses to let you graduate without actually learning the lesson, because life will eventually test you anyway. Saturn simply prefers that you prepare before the exam arrives. Saturn governs cortisol, your stress and discipline hormone. The relationship between sustained effort and cortisol regulation is one of the most studied in human physiology. Brief acute stress followed by recovery, the pattern of challenging effort and rest, actually strengthens the cortisol axis over time, making you more resilient resilient, more disciplined, and more capable of sustained effort without burning out. This is called hormetic stress. Think about what happens when you lift weights. You don't become stronger while lifting. You become stronger after recovering. The challenge creates the signal. Recovery builds the adaptation. Discipline works exactly the same way. Every time you voluntarily do something difficult, your brain learns something. I survived, and I can do it again. The same mechanism that makes muscles grow when you lift weights applies to your capacity for sustained discipline. You are not born with a fixed amount of willpower. You build it the same way you build strength, by practicing it at the edge of your current capacity and then recovering. People often wait until they feel disciplined before taking action. Saturn reverses the equation. Take action first. Discipline arrives later. Feelings follow habits far more often than habits follow feelings. The ancient astrologers described Saturn as the planet of labor for a reason. Not just metaphorical labor, actual physical work. The body is Saturn's domain, and physical work, specifically the kind that requires sustained effort over time rather than explosive bursts, is the most direct way to strengthen Saturn's governance. Walking, carrying, building, maintaining, repairing. These are Saturn activities. They build the cortisol axis. They strengthen the bones. They develop the relationship with sustained effort that Saturn is always asking for. Notice how almost none of those activities look impressive on social media. Saturn doesn't care, because algorithms reward attention. Saturn rewards repetition. Beyond physical work, Saturn responds to long-form commitment, not month-long challenges, not 90-day sprints, years. The decision to do one thing consistently for a year or more, without changing the goal or rebranding the project, directly works the Saturn muscle. Most people never do this because most people are living in Jupiter mode, always expanding, always pivoting, always beginning something new. Saturn does not move like that. Saturn plants one seed and waters it for years. While everyone else keeps digging up their seed to check if it's growing, Saturn keeps watering. Because growth doesn't need constant inspection, it needs consistent care, and eventually the tree speaks for itself. And Saturn responds to delayed reward, specifically building the capacity to act without immediate return. Every time you do the work and do not receive immediate validation and continue anyway, you are making a Saturn deposit. These deposits are slow, but they compound over time the same way interest compounds. And unlike Jupiter's belief or Venus's attraction, the Saturn compound is indestructible, because it was built when nobody was watching and nothing was rewarding you for it. That's the difficult part, not working hard without applause. Anyone can stay motivated when the views are climbing, when the business is growing, when people are complimenting you, when everything looks like it's working. Saturn wants to know who you are when none of that happens. Who are you when nobody claps, when nobody notices, when the results are still invisible? Because that's where discipline is born. Not in success, in silence. Imagine two people starting the exact same project. One quits after 3 months because nobody cared. The other continues for 3 years because they cared. Saturn already knows which one will eventually win. Not because they're more talented, because they stayed. Consistency is one of the rarest skills in the modern world. We're surrounded by distractions, notifications, endless scrolling, constant novelty. Everything is competing for your attention. Saturn asks you to compete for your own attention, to return to the same work again and again and again until repetition becomes identity. Modern neuroscience actually supports this idea. Repeated behaviors strengthen the neural pathways associated with them. The more consistently you perform an action, the less effort your brain requires to repeat it. In other words, discipline literally becomes easier the more you practice it. That doesn't mean the work gets easier. It means you become the kind of person who naturally does difficult work. That's an important difference. Saturn isn't trying to make life easier. It's trying to make you stronger. One last thing about Saturn. If you've listened this far, you've probably realized something. Saturn never promised a shortcut. It promised a foundation, and foundations take time. Which brings us to one of the most famous astrological events ever discussed: Saturn's return. The moment Saturn completes one full orbit around the Sun and returns to the exact position it occupied when you were born happens at approximately 29 to 30 years of age, and again at 58 to 60. These are the Saturn return periods, among the most well-known events in Western astrology and deeply documented in Vedic tradition as well. People hear Saturn return and immediately panic, as if Saturn shows up at your front door holding a checklist of everything you've done wrong. In a way, that's not entirely inaccurate. The first Saturn return is when the bill arrives. Everything you built in your 20s gets audited. Every foundation that was poured correctly stands. Every shortcut collapses. It is is not a punishment, it is a structural inspection. And the people who did the real, unglamorous work in their 20s, who built slowly and consistently and without needing external validation, emerge from their first Saturn return with something real. Because Saturn doesn't ask how impressive your plans were, it asks, what still exists? The people who performed productivity without practicing it, who announced rather than built, who chased Jupiter's expansion without Saturn's discipline underneath it, emerge from their Saturn return facing exactly the reconstruction project they avoided starting earlier. Here's the thing, Saturn never forgets unfinished foundations. Ignore them for 10 years and they'll still be waiting. Only now they're usually more expensive to rebuild. It is the same amount of work. Saturn only changes the timing. Do it before the return or do it during the return. The work is the same. The difference is in how much of your 20s you spent doing it. The choice was never whether you'd do the work, only when. And that, my friends, is Saturn, the planet that marks the edge of what human perception could reach on its own, the boundary between easy and real, between borrowed confidence and earned capability. Saturn does not want your passion. It does not want your talent. It wants your time. Because time is the only currency Saturn has ever accepted. Not promises, not intentions, not potential. Time. Invested one ordinary day at a time. And here's the strange part. The people who resist Saturn often spend years trying to avoid discomfort, only to experience even greater discomfort later. The people who willingly accept small daily discomforts often earn extraordinary freedom. That's Saturn's paradox. The heavier road today becomes the lighter life tomorrow. One disciplined workout, one chapter read, one difficult conversation, one promise kept to yourself. None of them look life-changing on their own, but Saturn has never judged a single day. It judges the pattern, because your future isn't built by your biggest moment. It's built by your most repeated one. So respect time, respect consistency, respect the process even when the process doesn't seem to respect you yet, because one day you'll look back at the years you thought nothing was happening and realize Saturn was quietly building someone you couldn't have become any other way. And if you give Saturn your time, everything else follows. Like and subscribe for the next planet, because the universe still has more to teach you.